Hey guys, this is the Orion version 2.5. It is a top-mounted TKL keyboard, and it also has RGB underglow, which bleed out through the sides and the back of the kit, which I personally think is a really nice touch to the overall aesthetics of the board. This keyboard is built with TKC Fear Scales, which is the long-lost sibling of the banana splits. It's basically the same switch, but just recolored. The top and bottom housings are made out of nylon and a blend of polycarbonate, with the stem being made out of palm. And since the switches were really smooth from factory, I went over it very thinly with Gazzew 3G lube on the bottom housing and on the stem itself. It doesn't look like I'm using any lube in this process here, but that's how little lube I'm actually using. For the springs, I put them all inside a container and put a few drops of Krytox 105 and shook them up to make sure that all the springs get an even coat of oil. The switch was then reassembled using 0.15mm TX film, while making sure that the TX film is properly seated between the top and bottom housings upon reassembly. Next up, we have the stabilizers. I used Durock v2 stabs coupled with the Epsi Mod. I'm not going to go into how I did the Epsi Mod, but I'll leave a link down below, which will take you to Epsilon Keyboard's video on how to do this mod yourself. I went over the stem and the housing of the stabilizer with Krytox 2.5 grade 0. I usually find that putting too much lube on these components can make your stabilizer a bit sluggish, so I make sure that I only put a thin coating on both of these parts. And since I did the Epsi Mod on these stabilizers, there's really no need to put too much lube on these wires. I went over the wire with a very thin coat of Krytox 2.5 grade 0, and then I made sure to lube where the bend of the wire clips into the stabilizer housing. After all 84 switches and 5 sets of stabilizers were prepared, the board was assembled using a polycarbonate plate. Again, since this is a top-mounted board, the plate and PCB was screwed onto the top of the casing separately from the bottom casing. Here's a quick time-lapse of me screwing in everything. There are 10 screws that mount the PCB and plate assembly into the top of the housing. I know that some people like to remove some of these screws to add a little bit more flex to the keyboard, but I just opted to put them all in. Now we have the bottom casing. The diffuser was mounted onto the cutouts of the bottom casing, and the front diffuser was mounted onto the top casing in the cutout. Here we line up the screw holes of the top and bottom casing, making sure they're all straight, so I don't strip any of the threads as I assemble the board. Using a zigzag pattern really helps in the alignment and joining of the two housings, and it is also a really good habit to have to prevent the threads from being stripped. Also, if you feel some heavy resistance while tightening a screw, make sure to back off, realign the board, then retighten the screw. The keycaps that I opted to use on this board are the Retro Cyrillic keycaps from ePBT, and I personally think a beige keycap set on a silver board like this really completes the aesthetics of the entire board. And to top it off, here's an artisan that I got recently from N-Key. It's pretty cute. Now that the board is complete, let's move on to the sound test. And there we have it. The board sounds and feels pretty good. Has a nice little poppy sound to it, although I'm not really the biggest fan of the backspace, but we should be able to fix that next time.